Welcome to the Daily Word, verse by verse. Grab your Bibles and follow along as we continue in our study through the Gospel of John. Keep in mind, I am using the Holman Christian Standard Bible, so if you're using a different translation, the read is different, but the message is the same. We're going to pick up our study in chapter 5. Chapters 5 through 10. We're going to see that Jesus has some of the most contentious and intense conversations with the Jews. They're going to confront him, and he's going to give it back to them, and he's going to give it back to them hard. Verse 1, it says, after this, meaning after his time in Galilee. Remember, he went to Galilee in the 4th chapter. He was actually on his way to Galilee when he made his stop through Samaria. After this, the Jewish festival took place, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. By the sheep gate in Jerusalem, there was a pool called Bethesda in Hebrew, which has 5 colonnades. Within these lay a large number of sick, blind, lame, and paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water, because an angel would go down into the pool from time to time and stir up the water. The first one who got in after the water was stirred up recovered from whatever ailment he has. Now, it's important to note that John is not saying that an angel, I'm going to put it like this way, people gathered around because from time to time this water would stir up. Some kind of way, a folklore spread it that an angel was the one who was stirring the water, and that anyone who jumped into the pool doing the agitation would be healed of whatever sickness they had. Now, if you read this, it almost sounds like John is saying that, but you have to keep in mind the sort of how John is reporting it. Now, let me just give you one quick example. We're going to come back to this verse, but down in verse 18, I just want to give you an example here. This is why the Jews, verse 18, this is why the Jews began trying to all the more kill him. Not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own father. Now, I just read that. We'll come back to this verse, but notice John saying that Jesus was breaking the Sabbath. Well, Jesus wasn't breaking the Sabbath, but that the Jews were accusing him of breaking the Sabbath. But if you just kind of read that right there, you would almost think that that's how John is reporting it, that Jesus was breaking the Sabbath. But it's a language thing. It's kind of the dynamic of language. All right. So in other words, people gathered around and this pool because from time to time, this water agitated. We don't know exactly why the water agitated, and keep in mind, John never tested people actually got healed either. Now, verse 5, one man was there who had been sick for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew he had already been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the sick man answered, "I don't have any man to put me in a pool when the water is stirred up. But while I am coming, someone goes down ahead of me." "Get up," Jesus told him. "Pick up your mat and walk." Instantly the man got well, picked up his mat and started to walk. In other words, this man was crippled. He couldn't walk. Now he can walk. Now, that day was the Sabbath, and this is where all of this starts with them. Okay, verse 10. So the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "This is the Sabbath. It is illegal for you to pick up your mat and pick up your mat." Now, notice they said it is illegal. It wasn't illegal. What this man was violating was the Pharisees' interpretations and traditions. The actual Sabbath day law said that you shouldn't do any work. Now, if this man was, let's say, stacking the mat, if he was arranging, doing some type of chore, like a yard, yard work by transporting the mat from one place to the other, then he would be breaking the Sabbath. So the fact that he's exerting energy, right, is not wrong. Because if you go by the strict interpretations of the Pharisees, you could barely move. I mean, picking up a glass of water to drink could be breaking the Sabbath, but it wasn't. It was their strenuous and foolish interpretations. Verse 11. He replied, "The man who made me well told me," now keep that in mind, the man who made me well, this man had been sick for 38 years. "The man who made me well told me, pick up your mat and walk." "Who is this man who told you, pick up your mat and walk?" They asked. But the man who was cured did not know who it was, because Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. After this, Jesus found him in the temple complex and said to him, "See, you are well. Do not sin anymore, so that something worse doesn't happen to you." Now, I want you to not trip over the issue of when Jesus says to this man, "Do not sin anymore unless a worse thing happens to you." That this is not a universal plea or command. Okay, so you cannot equate your misfortune or the fact that you got sick or something bad happened to you that I sinned or something like that. A lot of people think this way, that if something bad happens to me, that is because I sinned, and that's not true. Jesus is telling this man that if I was a promiscuous person and I was going out chasing every woman, and then I get herpes, I contract herpes, and then let's say Jesus heals me, and then he tells me, "Sin no more," meaning stop your womanizing ways, lest something worse happens to you. Okay? In other words, that would be specific to me. So this is not something in general. In other words, all sin doesn't lead to sickness or even bad things. Now, but Jesus told this man that, and this man had some questionable moral character. Why? Why do I say that? Look at what this man does. Notice his actions. Verse 15. The man went and reported to the Jews that it was Jesus who made him well. And that's astonishing. This man had been sick for 38 years. Jesus heals him, and the first thing he does is he runs to the Pharisees. And we're going to see later why the Jews feared the Pharisees. Okay? Verse 16. Therefore the Jews began persecuting Jesus because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus reported to them, "My Father is still working, and I am working also." This is why the Jews began trying all the more to kill him. Not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. So now we can see this verse in context. In other words, they're accusing Jesus of breaking the Sabbath. Their interpretations, their rules, okay, their traditions. And notice he said that, and so what is also interesting is they know what Jesus is saying. They know the claims of Jesus. By Jesus saying that God was his Father, notice he said he's making himself equal with God. Okay? Verse 19. Then Jesus replied, "I assure you, the Son is not able to do anything on his own, but only what he sees the Father doing. For whatever the Father does, the Son also does these things in the same way. For the Father loves the Son and shows him everything he's doing, and he will show him greater works than these, so that you may be amazed. And just as the Father raises the dead and gives them life, so the Son also gives life to anyone he wants to." And this is an interesting distinction right here. Even from the remember his disciples. None of the apostles or the disciples worked miracles on their own. I know sometimes in theological circles you hear people saying making miracles on demand. No apostles ever worked a miracle on demand. They did it as God granted, but they never did it on demand. Jesus is the only one who is doing this on demand, or actually not demand, but when he wants to. Verse 22, the Father, in fact, judges no one, but has given all judgment to the Son, so that all people will honor the Son just as they honor the Father. Anyone who does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him. So how can Jesus back up his claims that he is the Son of God? And by the way, remember, the Jews know exactly what he's saying. They know exactly the claim that Jesus has made. Well, Jesus is saying, look at my works. Right? And if you go in the Old Testament scriptures, because keep in mind, he's talking to the Jews. He's talking to the religious leaders. And they know the Old Testament. God raised the dead. God healed. Now, Jesus is doing the same works, which demonstrates that he is who he claims to be. What is even more astounding is that they see it and they are rejecting it. Just as he said before, you're not accepting our testimony. All right, we'll pick it up at verse 24 next time, so I'll see you then.